Hi, I'm Austin Wintory, and this is the Game Maker's Notebook. Today I'm talking with Aldo Sampaio, who is the audio director at Yellow Brick Games. And this is an unusual episode of this podcast because today, the day we're recording this, is one day before the inaugural title of Yellow Brick Games called Eternal Strands shipped, which I had the pleasure of scoring. So this is the first time I've interviewed an audio colleague on the cusp of a release that we got to collaborate on together. But that said, of course, 99% of the conversation is about his incredible career, beginning in Australia, working at studios like Pandemic on Destroy All Human, joining Ubisoft for over a decade and working on a bunch of Assassin's Creed titles, including some very influential decisions that he made as part of that, before striking it out and joining Yellow Brick, where I had the great privilege of working with him. So it was a really fun chat. He's an absolutely lovely guy who has added immeasurably to our industry, and I hope you enjoy.
Hey,
Good morning, sir.
how's it going?
You are only mildly flu-stricken,
Yes,
which is
mildly.
good. So
80% there.
this will be like,
Yeah.
like the True Lies truth serum. Your flu state will get you to be extra candid and reveal all your secrets, which is good.
Got some tea here, so it's gonna pad me well.
Some properly Yellow Brick branded tea. I love it.
Yeah.
Um,
product.
Well, you, in addition to being the slightly, mildly under the weather, have also recently, as we were just talking about, you've undergone the nice whiplash from warm Jamaican tropical weather to sub-zero, Arctic freeze
yeah, the
of
Arctic
our
front.
friends to the north.
Yeah.
So I will preemptively bear with you if you are incoherent. But this is exciting
No worries.
because I haven't done one of these with someone that I've had the great pleasure of recently collaborating with. Most of the time it's,
Yeah.
fellow composers or audio directors that, I've known a long time and maybe even worked together, but not literally 24 hours from shipping a title together, which is novel. But before we get to Yellow Brick and Eternal Strands, we could spend this entire thing just talking about your career leading up to that point, because that's been its own story. And so let's do this in a slightly methodical way, and start at the beginning. I actually don't if you told me, I'm completely spacing, but sort of your journey into games in general before obviously your time at Ubisoft. So why don't you give me the rundown on what got you into all this craziness?
Okay. That goes way back.
Yeah, man, take
So
me to the
yeah,
beginning.
the journey was like probably circa like 2000, like so it's almost like 2000, 2002, 2003. I was like at well, I was in University Sydney, just doing a master's degree, a master's in design science, which was actually doing like it majored in audio design, which was actually kind of a new curriculum that they were going for, because they saw the rise in sound design overall at the university, which was really cool. It dealt with like it was predominantly film and television, audio signal flow, and studio design. And, so and that got me really interested in. I was always interested in games, like from the ground up, like. Had like my Sega Mega Drive, playing like Alex Kidd and Wonder Boy, and like
Nice.
yeah, there's so many games that played throughout the years. Yeah, so always a gamer through and through. But I've always had like a love for sound and how sound actually like was recorded, like the signal flow, and I was always very musical as well. Started playing guitar very young as well, getting into that. Long story short, I was at the University of Sydney, and then doing the degree at the time, and I was trying to get into any job that could do anything to do with sound. Actually, like from the jobs that were doing like audio visual presentations for like setting up microphones for presentations that were happening at press conferences at certain at this hotel, to like being a
AV
boom.
work.
It was like the AV work, exactly. Yeah. So I was doing AV work. I was doing boom operating on like film sets, like just to get in to like be the sound mixer. And then somehow landed a really awesome job at Trackdown Scoring Stage, which is in Sydney, Australia. And that was actually setting up orchestras, like miking up all the different sections, like the first violins, all the horn sections, and everything like
Was
that.
that in
And
kind of like an assistant engineer kind
yes,
of role?
yeah. In that role, it started like from the assistant role, and then like worked my way up, which was quite awesome, and got to experience quite a lot of movies. There was a movie with. Was like Moulin Rouge. I think we recorded some actors there, and Masters and Commanders got to work on that.
All the
And
big Australian productions, basically.
yeah, pretty much. And like and Farscape, that was like there was a sci-fi series that was worked on that. Yeah, and like there's nothing that beats like having an orchestra in like the scoring stage, and just recording that is just the feeling is just nothing like it. So
Preach into the choir, my friend.
oh yeah, yeah.
So two questions that arise just from that. Forgive my little parenthetical, but just before we get too far from those origin moments,
mm,
um, given the interest that you took in sound, it's to me it's pretty impressive that the schools started offering these kinds of programs. Like the master's degree that you're describing is pretty
mm,
specific, obviously, and we take that kind of stuff for granted today.
yeah, yeah,
But similar to you, when I was in school, they didn't have they were just starting to offer these kinds of programs. Like I
exactly.
remember when I was
Yeah,
at USC, they had a video game design program, and just a couple years earlier, when I was in high school and I was contemplating going into game design, the option was computer science. You didn't
exactly.
study
Yeah.
games unto themselves. So what would you have done? What was even the path just a few years earlier? What would have been the road?
So before getting onto that master's degree, I was actually at there was it's like a JMC Academy, which was doing audio engineering specifically into that. Like it was like a graduate diploma of
Mm,
that. And so you first went into dabbled into that role to like know what's the studio, like the studio side of things. It's like, okay, what's a control, what's a mixer, what's the
right.
recording signal part, those type of things. Once and I love that, going into that, that surpassed me actually getting into a scholarship into doing into University of Sydney to actually get into the master's degree. And then they actually that was pretty much, I think it was like the first year that they offered that, and I kind of
Oh
like
wow.
dove in. I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. So and that went into that role there, into the because they had it as called design science, but there were many like pockets, like you could actually go like, biology, like chemistry, and then like audio design came up. I was like, okay, so I went into that. It was also like dealing with like acoustics, and one
Mm,
really awesome thing that I remember way back is we went to there's this procedure that you can do, oralization, when you can actually model a building and virtually, and try to actually get its acoustics properties.
like impulse response kind of measurements, you
Exactly.
mean? Yeah.
And so one of the actual elements that we did as part of the one of the courses is that we went and did an oralization of the Sydney Opera House. And so,
Mm.
and so, trying to, like, we went at like midnight, because like, and we went all the way to like 6 o'clock in the morning, moving the microphones and doing impulse recordings, and trying to emulate that space
Wow.
programmatically from that. And so we did like a comparison between a real violinist and a violin that was recorded in an anechoic chamber, and tried to simulate that. Yeah, and I
Must have
remember
given
that
you a new appreciation for the Altiver presets and things that,
exactly when as soon as
claim
it
to
start.
nail it.
Yeah, yeah. And the one awesome thing was that, well, the computing power back in the day, it was like 20 years ago. It took, I think it was like, with all its computing power, it took like a week to actually analyze the computation to create that impulse response. Yeah. So
Probably
now,
on today's machines, that's a 2 minute
yeah, yeah.
runtime. That's
So
hilarious.
it was pretty crazy, and
I
and
love
get to,
those kinds of stories of like,
yeah,
visual effects in movies back in those days where it was like literally a week of rendering a shot.
pretty much,
It's just
yeah,
so crazy how.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
and and
the
so and
other, oh, sorry,
oh,
continue.
I was going to say, and so from that, like, the job at like track down, got to experience like a lot of the like the music design, production, how to record and all that stuff. And a job came up, it was a sound design position at in a computer games studio, and that they were working on Stargate at the time. It was SG1, and I was
Mm,
like very interested. I was always interested in like non-linear media, and trying to push myself into get into that. And so I landed a role as audio designer there, trying to like do the recordings, sound design, gathering all the sound aesthetics that they did, that they recorded from the show. And actually, funnily enough, actually worked on Unreal, the engine at the time that was used for the Unreal tournament. I think it was way
yeah.
back. It was like it was meant to be on PS2 and Xbox at the time, and PC. And I remember that the sound budget was, which it was like 2 megs all up, which is pretty nuts at the
That's
time.
so
Yeah,
that's so insane to think about.
yeah,
We're
yeah,
so spoiled now. Honestly, it's not
yeah,
even that was crazy. It's just that was normal,
yeah,
and now we're utterly spoiled.
yeah, yeah.
But that actually kind of nicely um, addresses the other question that came to mind. Was when you mentioned your Sega Mega Drive and just sort of being a gamer growing up. It made me wonder what the perception of the development scene was like locally because I think, again, from my layman's perspective, Australia, particularly Melbourne above all, has come into its own as one of the major sort of enclaves for no pun intended, for game development, but only in the last few years. You think of it as sort of, especially obviously the indie scene is pretty big in Melbourne, but it made me wonder, what did you look at it and think, oh, I have to move somewhere if I want to be part of this? That's a classic thing where people grow up somewhere and they're looking kind of over the fence, and saying, I have to leave eventually if I really am serious about being in this industry. Is that a fair assessment, or did you feel like, no, I can stick around?
Well, I tried to the idea was at the time is that the gaming scene in Australia was actually it was getting quite a lot of funding at the time, and the industry was steadily growing in Sydney, and I also after Perception I went to Pandemic Studios, which was in Brisbane, and was working on Destroy All Humans, and at the time, and
I always forget they were in Brisbane.
Yeah, and it was I think the two big capitals was Melbourne and Brisbane, and Brisbane started becoming it was almost like a mecca for game companies that were kind of flourishing at the time. I think it was around about 2004 to 2008, around about that time. And a lot of people from overseas actually they love the Australian weather, and they flocked to Australia, and actually a lot of my relationships were actually nurtured from the fact that people came to these companies, and we networked that way. And then unfortunately the financial crisis at 2008, and a lot of studios shut down, and people went back to Europe and North America and stuff like that. And then that's how the connections grew in that way. It was unfortunate, but opportunity arose from that as well, which was a kind of good thing.
Has Brisbane ever really recovered its scene from those heights? I feel like I don't hear it mentioned much these days, but obviously, I would say ignorant.
I would say it's more it's less AAA now. It's more like AA indie on that front. That you still see mobile. A lot of mobile games are emanating from that end. So I think that's and then also I think the Australian government they stopped the funding as well. I think around about that time, and that kind of actually led to a little bit of a decline in that industry. But I think in recent years they've actually wisened up, and they're trying to revamp the industry in a little bit.
Right.
So so I was at Pandemic for a couple of years, and that was really awesome. Got to go on recording shoots and working on Mercenaries. There was an open world game at the time. It was really cool to record all the machine gun sounds and
Chris Tilton, I think.
Chris Tilton and Michael Giacchino. Giacchino, yeah. And
I forgot Mercenaries was a Pandemic game.
Yeah.
I did not remember that.
Yeah,
I always thought that game had one of the best ad campaigns I ever saw in my life, where they had these kind of animated. It was obviously not in-game capture, it was stylized, animated, and they had this hip hop track and a whole world was sort of textured with the surface of money. And I always used that. I gave a lot of talks and stuff at the time, and I always used that ad campaign as an example of when I saw that, I thought, oh man, if the game actually looks like that, that will be so cool and stylized. And then it was it was a much more conventional game compared to the way the ad presented it. But it was one of those where I was like, man, what a cool little glimpse. I'll never forget that. It feels like 100 years ago now, but
I think it was one of the I can't remember, but I think that was one of the first open world games that I actually truly played. Like in terms of like just doing whatever you wanted to do. Like it had the freedom to do what you wanted to do in the same world with no level loading in that sense.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, like
I
that.
didn't remember
That's
that.
what. Well, well, is Destroy All Humans also had that kind of mindset where you could just like
Right.
it was loading into a map, and then you can actually just you were an alien and you were just blowing stuff up with all cool ridiculous guns and stuff. And I remember like editing Gary Scheinman's musical score, and that was quite awesome with the theremin that he
Yep.
used.
Oh yeah. Very
Yeah,
50s sci-fi. I think he was
yeah.
literally. I think he was my very first ever guest on this show.
Oh really? Oh
It
cool.
was
That's
it was
awesome.
either he or Jason Graves. That the two of them were the two first ones.
Yeah.
And I can't remember. We did them both during GDC, if memory serves. But yeah, I always, to me, Destroy All Humans holds a particularly important place in kind of game music history, because obviously the connection between Emily Ridgway
Oh yeah,
and
Emily. Yeah.
Gary, it led directly to BioShock, which to me, BioShock is like one of the high marks of game scoring, and Destroy All Humans is where
Oh
it
yeah.
began. It was a very important stepping stone, and it's just a super fun score in its own right. You know, it was like clearly a composer who knew what he was doing in that kind of classic sci-fi orchestral Bernard Herrmann sort of
And
way.
a tidbit of a fun fact is that like when I initially arrived at Pandemic in Brisbane, I met Mick Gordon, who was there at the
Oh,
time,
that's right.
and he was on his way out to actually form his own company, and it's kind of funny how like you cross paths with people on in the industry like that. It's really cool.
Wasn't he sound design
Yeah,
initially? Like he
yeah.
wasn't. He
He was
wasn't
doing so. Yeah, yeah.
working as a composer for.
No, not in-house composer. He was doing the sound design, and I was actually going to like take his role because he wanted to do like he actually wanted to go into music scorings, and that I think it was he wanted to form, it was called Game Australia or something, Gaming Australia.
Right.
Like yeah. So yeah, that led him into other avenues as well. So it's really cool there. Yeah, and then so so Destroy All Humans, Mercenaries. I was working on another game that unfortunately that what happened was there was a Bioware and Pandemic. There was a merger that happened. It was about a year before that we started on that game. And then a year after that, which was around about like 2006, EA bought the Pandemic Bioware conglomerate under their wing, and then the financial crisis happened, and then unfortunately, like the laying offs happened, and so that they had to shut down the studio. But Ubisoft caught wind of that in Montreal, and they said, "Oh, you guys worked on like an open world game. We have an open world game working on our own. Would you like to come? It's called Assassins." I was like, "Okay, all right," and so hopped on a plane, and my girlfriend, who's my wife at the time, we came over, and yeah, we said that it was only going to be 18 months. It was a stint. So it's like 14 years later.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
So how long were you were laid off?
Yeah.
But then sort of scooped up. How long were you in limbo?
Pretty much. So I would say in a span of like so it was around about like February, and then I started around about April. So it's probably like the one month layover, like in terms of like
Being unemployed.
being unemployed. Yeah. So
Was that one of those? Did you feel? I ask obviously because it's a very relevant topic in today's business. Where I was just reading a presentation that it was like over the last 2 years there was something like 35,000 layoffs. It's completely staggering,
which is insane. Yeah.
And so there's a non-trivial chance that someone who listens to this has
It's probably
recently or
listening.
is currently
Yeah,
dealing with that. So I'm
yeah.
curious, what was that period like for you? Did you find yourself confident something would come up? Were you having to kind of hustle on odds and ends jobs in the meantime, or
I felt
not to pry, obviously,
no,
but
no,
I'm
no.
just curious what how you, as a freelancer, I always operate under the I'm in a permanent state of laid off. I have no job security. I have no safety net. So I I struggle to relate to to that kind of
Mm,
the emotional aspect of it because I'm just so kind of um, trained, I guess, to just never think of myself as truly safe.
yeah.
And so I love to ask about it just to learn that perspective,
I think it was also like for the many years that like we was there like at the previous companies learning like you've learned so much like that you've like gained all those skills like for the like sound design, audio design. I was kind of like the jack of all trades
Sure.
when doing that like of dialogue editing, music editing, audio integration, all that stuff. And just I didn't feel that it was actually um like felt like very insecure in that front. I felt like I was going to get a job. It was just now where was I going to get that next opportunity in that
Sure.
way? And I think that if you keep with that mindset, that I don't think you're going to be like struggling in that mindset. So you just keep plowing on like that. That's how I go about things.
I
Yeah.
think it's worth underlining what you said right before the mindset comment, though, where I think the reason why you can have the confidence that things will sort of work out is because you were such a sponge, because you are so loaded for bear with valuable skills.
Mm.
That I think it's just it's worth underscoring that you justifiably weren't panicked because you
Also
worked
learning on the
so hard to
job.
learn so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if someone coasts, they probably will find it more challenging. Or if they know just their one,
Mm,
if they know
mm.
just their one thing, um, obviously
Uh,
it's going to make it trickier. I would
yeah,
I would
yeah,
think.
and also like the thought of actually just traveling to a different country as well, like that dawned on me as well. It's like it's like there's
Mm,
halfway around the world. It's like okay, all right, let's see how this goes. And I also want to ship a title as well, like get some like and I knew that like Assassins was like it was like midway through production around that time, and they needed people to like do some of the audio integration. And I
right.
think like my first task I remember getting into Montreal was like doing like all the foley and the cinematics, like
Mm,
getting all the laying down the tracks and trying to like integrate all the foley work, all the sound design work that was for the numerous amount of cinematics that Assassins has.
yeah, no
So
kidding.
I remember it was like
And then in
on
those days, it's nothing compared
yeah
to
yeah
the
compared
current
to now.
iterations. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I remember I was like on Assassin's Creed 2, like they had like something in the order of like 576 scenes or something that they had to do. It was yeah, it was incredible. So
Who was the audio director? Like who would have been leading your
so
department on the first one?
that was Mathieu Janson. He was
Right,
the
right.
audio director. Yeah. And awesome guy. Like trying like learning quite a lot of like new skills and like ramping up into like real like AAA production, and also in like a compressed timeline as well, which was kind of nuts, like with the amount of work which I had to do. So that was like it was just getting into the ground running on that front. So it was
How much was
refreshing.
left of the game when you joined?
Like you know how like every like sound always happens at the end. So it was pretty much like I would probably say they were midway like recording all the dialogue, getting like recording the music, getting I would say like half of the sound was pretty much done with
And you were,
half
but
left.
in calendar wise, you were how far from shipping?
6 months at the time. Yeah, so I was like, rock and roll. Let's get it done.
God, that's even
So-
worse than I was expecting.
so yeah, so that
Yeah,
was
that's
like hit the
gnarly.
ground running. I was like, oh my god, and keep in mind it's like that. It was around about it's like 2008 2009. It was the computer power wasn't 64-bit yet. It was still 32 bits, and the map sizes wasn't equipped enough for the open world on using the in-house engine that Ubisoft had. So they had to load in like they had to like restrict their quests or their missions that's what they called it at the time, the missions to make sure that like the computer was strong enough to actually fit one mission to load two cells together. I remember that was quite a challenge. Yeah.
Even things like how many audio streams could be
Yeah.
supported simultaneously would have been pretty
Yeah.
tight by
Yeah.
today's standards.
Yeah, I remember I think there was certain rules that you had to put in place in terms of like how many concurrent streams that you had to have. It was like what no, like if a stream was categorized as ambience and then it was cross-fading, you had to have a temporal fade and not an actual crossfade that actually had two streams that were concurrently playing, because
Right.
otherwise VO wouldn't play or the buildings wouldn't load because the disk access.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So
And the interactivity of the music would have been effectively
yeah.
non-existent as a result.
Yeah, I think I remember we had to load some music cues into memory. And then we had to stream the expiration music if I remember. It was something in those lines of that, because the lead program on the like the engine program kept knocking on our door and saying up, we're taking up their bandwidth to load the world. It's like, oh, okay.
It's so funny how audio, we're always the problem child
Yeah.
in the family in that regard, because, it's one of those where reviewers have picked up on this, that a game where the audio feels janky feels so much less polished. Whereas if there's graphics bugs or, like I feel like there's a higher tolerance or gameplay bugs, people can see them and, obviously they'll notice them and it's not great, but I feel like it's somehow more acceptable. But whereas audio sputtering and things like that just feel like
unacceptable. Yeah.
Yeah. Our ear. I remember once someone described it where they said, think of it this way: if a movie is streaming on average at 24 frames per second, and you drop frames, you have to drop quite a few frames concurrently before most people detect the frame rate going down.
Exactly.
Most people wouldn't be able to clock a difference between 24 frames a second and 23 frames a second. But 48K audio, it's like one sample, our ear hears a pop. So we have this insanely high fidelity perception of audio glitches compared to visual glitches. So it's like, it's funny because we're so out of sight, out of mind to the rest of the team. But if we have even the slightest problems, even a very layman consumer would pick up on it, which is fascinating bit of, it's a conundrum because, we're
really
not the sexy one on the team usually.
We really have to be like cognizant of that, especially during mixing and polishing as well. A game as it's one big aspect of like when you're experiencing a fully immersed game is that if the sound if you have the overall a feeling, if you get a feeling for the player and they feel immersed and they describe all these feelings, a large percentage of that is due in fact because of the audio has like played a huge role in that regard. But if something sticks out like a sore thumb, or like a bad sound or something, instantly their experience and immersion is like they're out of it. So you got to be really careful on that.
Or even just like voiceover
Mm-hmm.
that's fractionally out of sync with
Yep.
the
You're like,
animations.
oh, takes you
It's
out.
like watching bad dubbing,
Yeah.
of like a non-English film where they it's just if it's even slightly off, it's amazing how obvious and distracting it can be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So on the first one, then does that mean that your role was principally Foley and editing and things like that?
So it was well, audio design was like pretty much we're just like doing all cinematics, the sound design, the ambiences, the audio features for the glyphs and the sound design for all the weapon sounds that it was trying to like it's pretty much a bit of everything, to be honest. Yeah, and so
And
it was,
so then, well, let me tack on a second, because one of the
yeah.
things that I love about working with you is how unbelievably technical you are. I mean, way more than most everyone I've ever worked with in your type of role. And so I'm trying to get a sense. Obviously, you learned a lot at Pandemic and prior to that, and you've always been interested in that side of it. And I guess what I'm trying to work out is how quickly Ubisoft realized how much they could leverage that from you. Like, for example, were you principally working on the audio side, or were you also in the engine, setting up the actual implementation or the scripting or any other of the kind of under the hood work on the games side of it straight out of the gate?
Yeah, well, it was when I joined the company. I went full into like their engine and just like trying to understand it, like trying to learn every facets of like, okay, what does the AI do? How does their crowd system work? And talking to programmers and talking to the animators and like just digging into every single like system to get a deeper understanding, and like including like the ambient systems, like how do you even like create the ambiences for the world of like it was I think it was Rome and Florence and like all those beautiful like soundscapes, trying to emulate those experiences. And yeah, it's just basically like looking at every single system and then trying to like get my head around. And they newly incorporated Wise at the time for the
That was going to be my next question of
it
what
was
your
one of the
audio
first
tools were.
games. Yeah, and so that's when they like fully. One tidbit of fun fact is that at Pandemic was one of the first users of Wise when we were working on the game that didn't pan out, but like I was one of the first users of Wise way back. But that was actually pretty cool. And I was trying to convince the guys like, oh, we need to use this. I kind of see this as a big thing. It's gonna be pretty awesome to use because like we were all at Pandemic we were like using Lua script to actually implement the audio, which was kind of nuts. But,
it's very obviously very basic. Up till these third party tools came along, everything was so ad hoc and sort of barely give you what you needed it.
I remember like when like come mixing for Destroy All Humans, we were in the listening studio, and we were noting down what to mix, what to bump up, and what to do. And it wasn't real time mixing. It was like listening, playing the game, listening, making the notes, going back to your desk, and then like writing down like what you needed to do, and then go back, regenerate. Now like we have this luxury right now with like real-time profiling and mixing, and there's so many tools in Wise, and like there's also Fmod as well that you can also use that has like real-time mixing. It's amazing like what you can do right now. It's the power is yours.
The ability the fact of having to kind of fully play the game in order to actually hear the elements come together. There was no way to essentially simulate it. Is crazy. I mean, it's just so inefficient when you think about it, because there's the sheer number of hours you spend.
Yeah,
and if something is, I've worked on projects before where we had this kind of limitation. and because of the modular nature of it, you're shipping it knowing that there are plenty of cases that you never heard, and you're just hoping
You hope
that
in
you
a way.
set it all right, and that, you know, never mind that the levels are good, but even just that it's triggering the right things at the right times, because it's so, I mean, we still have this problem in a way because you know, the systems, the music systems can get so complicated that it's actually not really even possible to truly try every combination.
You can try,
but you can try, but it's
QA is your best friend for that. Like, so
No kidding.
what I tried to do, just is like segue a little bit, but I write up like a test plan of all the different scenarios that could actually occur. Like, okay, we go into fight, we go into exploration. It's nighttime, it's daytime, like all those different scenarios, and try to figure out those scenarios, and then the QA guys can actually go in and try to like listen out for the, like, what's the expected results it's meant to
so you're
play
writing out if the QA tester does X, it should do this. You're kind of giving them a roadmap of what to look for specifically.
Yeah.
That's really savvy. I've found on so many projects that I've worked on, even in engaging with QA, short of something like that, the problem is they don't know. Music is sort of subjective enough that it's hard for them to know if it was wrong. You know, like, especially when you get into the minutia of transitions and you know, how quick is it on the beat? Is it on the bar line? Did it you know, what was the fade out curve like? You know, and if they don't know what to listen for, you know,
the thing is, what I say is, like, if they don't know and if they feel that it's wrong, write it.
Well, for sure.
Write it down. It's a bug, and then we can at least like repro that step and just try to just have our listening critique on it. Even if someone else had it, it's good to get a second pair of ears on that.
Oh yeah, because they may flag something as wrong that actually wasn't, and then you realize, it's not as good an idea as I thought it was, and it reads as wrong even though it's actually correct. We've had a few of those as well. So you finished the first Assassin's Creed. It ships. Obviously, it's a dawn of a new era in gaming. Massive. I'll never forget playing that game, and I couldn't stop staring at the fabric. I'd never seen fabric move like that in a game. It was so mesmerizing. And obviously it was one of the open world
the cloth
games.
Mechanics was so
awesome.
It
was unbelievable.
It
was so awesome.
I remember moving slowly and just like trying to like move that fabric. I was like, can we put a sound on that? I don't know. It's like,
something very like procedural. So then I'm assuming by that point, you know, you're 6 months into your 18-month stint in Montreal. I imagine you felt pretty at home pretty fast there.
It was like a lot of things were like French as well, so it's like trying to learn like the new language as well. So it's like, okay, that's something good that we need to learn as well. I'm still not fully fluent in French, unfortunately, but I can understand a lot of the conversations. Taking up ice hockey, so that's one Canadian. I am now a Canadian citizen, so that's a cool thing.
Does that mean dual passport? Like you didn't have to give up Australian citizenship?
No. So that keep the Aussie passport.
Right.
So then from that project onto Prince of Persia went on the Forgotten Sands one, which was not the Sands of Time one, because that was before mine, before when I arrived. And so on that project, I got kind of promoted into like a lead audio design role, because they saw like, oh, you like to know like different systems. Okay, well, you can actually like lead a group of audio designers. I was like, okay,
very fast.
So I was like, okay, I was like, oh, okay. when went into that project, there was actually no sound on that project, and there was 4 months to ship, and it was like, oh my goodness, okay, all right. So what from one to this one, rock and roll. Okay, all right,
Even more extreme.
okay. So
Shorter timeline with less done, and not a small game.
No, it wasn't a small game at all. So, but it was a fun game because it was like it was a platformer where you had like I really love that mechanic where you actually reverse the time. Like you had like a reverse time mechanic, and then you can actually reverse, but then the sounds and everything, like soundscape wise, would actually play in reverse,
right,
which is really cool. And I remember I talking
that's probably
to
one of those features that was way harder to get working than than it probably looks like for how legible it is.
I asked because it was Steve Jablonski, and who was the composer with Penka.
Penka
Kaneva at the time, and she was assisting on the. I asked Penka. I said, okay, I want like for the reversed system, like for, and this wasn't on wires. It was using because it was the same engine, but they weren't using wires, and they were using something else, like their proprietary audio tools. So I said, okay, is there a way that we can musically, like the music soundtrack is still playing, but then is there such a way that we can, when we press that reverse time, is that we can get the texture of reverse, but just not reverse the music, but actually have it so the texture is reversed, but it's still in key and in tempo. So I came up like with this crazy idea. It's like, can you actually note, like when you have your notation, can you reverse the notation and then present it to the recorder, the musicians, play it in reverse, and then we reverse that back, and then it will be like when we're switching between the forward music and the reversed layer music, then it would in theory be in time and in sync. And Penka was like, oh my god, that's amazing, we'll try it. So they went off and they tried that approach, and it worked kind of magically. It was quite nice.
So does that mean every cue had to be recorded? Like, is that basically does this
melodic cue? Like so the melodic layer, yeah. So all the melodic layers would actually be recorded. Back. So the musicians would be like going, "Oh my god, what is this mess?"
Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
It feels backwards. It's like reading a sentence backwards, where those are all words that on their own make sense, but it feels very disorienting to play something that was very obviously written the other way.
And then played that back in with the actual like the percussion or the rhythmic layer that was actually happening underneath, because you're platforming, or like the idea being that when you do successive acrobatic moves in a certain time, the rhythmic section comes in and starts supporting the player ability, which is, it felt really cool. And then coupled that with the reverse time nature, then it actually felt really like flowy. It was really cool. So
does that mean that you had basically the alternate version of the melody stem just streaming along muted
underneath?
Right, and it would just flip them basically the moment that unlocked.
Exactly. So
wow. So that you're already in a different position from a stream limitation, I would think, from just even on a AC1 by comparison, if you're able to have it that granular.
So for this one, because and every game is different as well, because like the graphic budget is different, the sound budget is different. So on Prince of Persia, you had a lot more leeway in music because these levels were loaded. so
Right.
you
It's
can
not open world and all that. Yeah.
yeah. So when you go into the open world nature, then it starts getting into, oh, okay, you need to think a little bit more, like, what are the situations that could happen? Like in a platformer, you kind of, what's
Yeah. Yeah.
you
There's
can load
very,
everything in at that given moment.
totally. Yeah. There's very finite
Yeah,
things that can happen.
yeah, yeah,
That makes total sense. But still impressive to not be using something as robust, even its early days, as Wise
yeah, yeah.
for a trick like that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and I remember that, like, on that music stream, I think it was like six audio streams that were running in that, like, they weren't running like in parallel, but like, so, like, they were running concurrently, but then weren't taking up the stream buffer. So it's like,
Mm.
okay, you were like platforming. Oh, you're running. Oh, you're just exploring. You're not in combat. Oh, you're reverse time. So it would continually add, or like uh like like add or subtract depending on what the player was doing. It was a very smart system. Yeah. Yeah.
All in a 4-month turnaround.
Yeah, rock and roll.
And you were having to work out a system like that
Yeah.
and work with Steve and Panka
Yeah.
while also overseeing all the sound and Foley and things like that, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah. So it's so like managing a team of the audio. We had 3 audio designers that were in on that, and so yeah, it was rock and roll. So we managed to pull that out. Yeah, so that was a lot of fun too. Yeah,
I will say, as much as I support the general move to mitigate and or outright condemn crunch culture, I can't
yeah,
deny
that was much.
that exhilaration. I'm sure it's like one of those where you wouldn't necessarily wish it on anyone, but at the
No,
same time, I've had some really wonderful times in my life when you can't second guess yourself. You can't let anything kind of cloud your thinking. You're just like, okay, I have zero time to get this done, so I'm just going to focus and the kind of adrenaline of that, magical things can happen. Again,
yeah.
I don't want to be
Well,
I don't want to be sort of romanticizing it too much, but I've had good experiences in those
mm.
paradoxically in those very stressful narrow windows before.
But yeah, it was like when you're in the zone, like you're in the zone, and then like you really hone in and like there's pros and cons. There's a lot of cons. It's like you're
Yeah, your
crazy,
health and your
crazy working and all that. But
yeah.
at the same time, that like sometimes your best work also comes out in that. So that's yeah, that's the pro on that. So for after Prince of Persia, so it was on to finishing off AC2, and then going on to went on to AC2, and then after AC2 got onto I got promoted to audio director on Assassin's Creed Revelations. And
Hmm?
that was like the third installment of Ezio's
Right.
journey, which was quite nice. I love that ending. Spoiler alert. If
That it
I think
has
it's
an
been
ending.
enough time, so
I think
yeah,
you're safe. It's like the most beloved
yeah.
AC, sort of
Like
subfolder.
closing, yeah, which
Yeah.
was quite nice. Yeah, had like a good bow on that front. And one really awesome tidbit about that was that we went to go to Istanbul to record some ambiences, like to get
Mm.
the Grand Bazaar like audio aesthetic, and we actually went into the Hagia Sophia and recorded the impulse response for the Hagia Sophia, and I lugged around this PA speaker with it's like lugged it around, put it in the middle of the dome, massive dome. It was like
Amazing.
and managed to. I think it was like a 15-second impulse response. Like it just never ended. It was just awesome, and we implemented that. I think it was on the PS3. I can't remember. Yeah, I think it was the PS3 or PS4.
Yeah, 3. It would
3,
have been
yeah,
3, I think. I'm
yeah.
almost certain.
I remember that, like, because one of the maps, because Singapore studio was doing one of the Hagia Sophia map. It was called an LGS, which is like a linear gameplay system. So like Ezio would do like this run and race in one of the levels, and that. I remember I was like, we were negotiating with the engine programmers to dedicate some audio buffer for that impulse response, just for that. It's like, yes, we got it.
That's so, yeah.
So
I mean,
we
that's
loaded that entire impulse response into memory. I was like, yes.
that's amazing.
Uh,
It highlights, because there've been so many AC games, and because I think we just kind of have accepted that each one is a gargantuan project and each one is sort of bigger than the last. It's easy to overlook the insane detail and craftsmanship of all the different people that are brought to it. It's so, like, in my collaborations with Ubisoft, it's always mind blowing. All the like that story of just, sort of beg, borrowing, and steal with the engineers in order to have your amazing, sort of maximally immersive and realistic impulse response. Like, no one knows that what they would have been missing, or what they have when they have it in those cases. It's just, but I love that there's just a dedication to craft. It's sort of a craziness, to be honest, but it's an amazing, and it's certainly a craziness I share a kinship with.
It's like a Frankenstein experiment, and see what happens at the end of it.
Yeah, it really raises the bar, though. I mean, it's why those games, even as the industry is, dealing with the challenges associated with the budgets of these games, they're so important to the art form, because all these techniques that, like, think about, not to get ahead of ourselves, but think about all the things that Eternal Strands has benefited from because of your time, proofing out all these crazy ideas on these games.
Yeah.
It disseminates into the industry, and games that are a fraction of the budget end up learning from these techniques, and it just sort of raises all games. I think it's just too easy to not appreciate how there's like a few massive studios that are subsidizing the R&D of the tools of the whole industry, basically.
Yeah, and also, like, it's great to, like, learn from other games as well. Like, you always, like, one thing that, like, is instilled in. I remember, like, at Trackdown, when I was the studio assistant there, and Simon Ledley, that was the music editor. He always said, like, you'll always have something to learn. You never ever truly know anything. So always continue to keep learning and learning. And that's especially in games as well, because, like, engines evolve, like, new techniques come in, like, it's incredible. Like, every single project has been different, and in a good way, which is awesome. And that's why I love what I do, like, with gaming sound. It's super cool. And like, here we are.
So keep in mind, so obviously you continued your relationship with AC. You said you became the full-fledged audio director. So we sort of first interacted in the context of the early days on Origin.
Yes.
Was there what were you doing prior to that? Like, what's in the gap? Is there anything? There must be something else in the gap, right? Between Revelation and
after Revelations, did Black Flag went on to, that was
of course,
Black Flag. So went and did the audio for was the audio director on Black Flag. That was an awesome experience as well. As in, nice tidbit of information is that the sea shanties were almost about to get canned, like that. And I remember having a discussion. I think I talked to you about this. It's like we had to have there was an intense discussion to say the reason why we needed to have, like, the sea shanties in the game. And I was like, no, it's intrinsic on the pirate experience, and it's like, we have to get this. And I was like, and they said, okay, if you can find a gameplay reason, then we keep it. And I was like, okay, let's try to get the scrolls. There was some scrolls that you could actually chase, and then those scrolls would end up becoming the actual songs in the game. So yeah.
So does that mean prior to sort of gamifying finding the shanties, they just were ambiently on the ship and the team didn't?
At the time, it was a form of just fast travel. So like when you're on the ship, and then you actually wanted to fast travel from one place to another, and when you're in that fast travel, so like you're speed running to the next point, the shanties would. It was almost like we coined it pirate radio.
Right.
Basically, it's like
screen.
a pirate. It's a pirate radio, and like you play it, and then you hear the shanties. But then they said, no, budget reasons, we're going to cut it. And I'm like, no, don't cut it. We have to have it, please. It's there. So we ended up agreeing that, like, okay, have it as a gameplay mechanic, and yeah.
I hope they mailed you a nice bottle of champagne or something after that game ship, because that was. I do remember us talking about this, and I said it then, and I'll say it again. That was the win for that game. I mean, it was like, one of those. It's like it is amazing how you can get a composer as well known and established as Brian Tyler, but yet only people wanted to talk about was the freaking shanties. Yes. And it was performed. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was like a college. Yeah, like a university, like men's choir or something, like a glee club kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it was. There was like from McGill College, at the local Montreal University, and it's like professors and like they love singing their shanties in pubs and taverns around the locale. And one thing which was really funny was that when we're in the recording session and we're actually doing the sea shanties, they sang it beautifully. I was like, oh, okay, this is awesome. Like all the singing, but something was not clicking on my end. It was like, okay,
too nice.
It was too nice. It was like, okay, like these guys are pirates. Like we need to put some debauchery and so we did one take of professional score, and then the other one was like, okay, like let them like build out their lungs, like burp and do all sorts of stuff, and then we mixed it in to create that like sound aesthetic. It was pretty cool.
It was so impactful that when I was hired by Lydia not long after, one of the early discussions on Syndicate was, we need what is the Syndicate equivalent of the shanties? Like, I'm pretty sure this was something that came from above at Ubisoft,
because of the reception on that. It was kind of funny.
It was like we need so we ended up writing all these tavern songs specifically as like the Syndicate take on what is an in-world reason to have songs and all these like old English folk songs and people singing hymns on the street and stuff. And I thought it was awesome, and I couldn't believe the level of commitment that it got. I mean, my score was something like 3.5 hours, and there was another 90 minutes of in-world source music of all that stuff.
Yeah, which is awesome. Like it just adds to the overall immersion, especially when you're traveling on the because it does because the worlds are getting larger and larger and larger. You have to have something that actually like surpasses and gives that immersion while you're doing that.
Yeah, no, it was such an elaborate system. It was all the districts on the map. There were some pieces that could populate anywhere, and then there were some that were what Lydia referred to as district themes, where you would only hear this particular hymn around Westminster Abbey, and you would only hear this particular kind of like
that's so cool.
Cockney, like tavern song in this area of the map, and then I would incorporate those tunes into district-specific score cues so that you would, like when you do the Reach High Point, you'd hear the folk song come in that was local to that area.
That was a really cool mechanic.
All this is ultimately because of you and the shanty. All this system, I think, was a direct response to the idea that the players responded so well to the world coming to life. I don't know that anything's ever really quite matched how it felt. Black Flag is still one of the high points of the whole franchise, and
it felt amazing.
They were so satisfying. It made you want to. It's kind of like in Insomniac Spider-Man, how you never want to fast travel because you just swinging through New York as Spider-Man is so great all the time. That this felt like that when the crew got going. It was so satisfying that you just wanted to cruise around all the time. And it became this pleasure yacht. It wasn't even like a pirate thing at that point. You're just like, we're a Broadway cruise liner now.
One awesome thing about that experience is that when the player actually like collected the scroll, that scroll was actually tied to, like, it was, say it's like running down to Cuba, like and one of the scrolls was actually like found in Havana, and then that scroll would actually be at the top of their list when they got back onto the ship. So then like it actually intrinsically linked to what they actually collected. So it was really cool in that one. Yeah. And one cool thing is that on that project as well, we actually went down to Costa Rica to record the all the rainforest and jungle sounds, and all, like we really went down the hard.
I seem to remember hearing it. Yeah, I seem to remember your brush with death. Weren't you being sort of hunted by wild animals?
It was only it was a jaguar it was a pregnant jaguar mother that was about like 5 meters in front of us when we were recording like we were recording the distant howling monkeys, and so the howling monkeys were like bellowing out in the distance, and then all of a sudden, like our guide, who has a machete on him because he's cutting the trail, and he's like, freeze, stop, and we back away slowly, and then the jaguar was just like, just like with their cubs and just mosey on down. I was like,
I was gonna say. Raise a glass and rest in peace to the 3 Ubisoft sound designers who perished. Just know that it was worth it for the howling monkey ambiances in Black Flag, being eaten by a jaguar.
It was all about the howling monkeys. That was really
that's
cool.
Awesome. So obviously, that one you did not have to do in 6 months.
No, that one, that was a couple of years in the making on that one. So that, like, we had like a good timeline on that, and and then
basically straight from that into Origin, I would think.
So
more or less.
After that, it was also I went to Sweden for a little bit just before they was looking at the roadmap on their Snowdrop engine, and see at the time it was like working a little bit on the Division before it became the Division. So it was like it was around about conception time, and seeing like how helping them with the roadmap on their tools and just guiding them in that way. So worked on that for a little bit, and then came back. Finished helped out with Watch Dogs as well. Like I kind of like jump in and parachute in. That
seems to be kind of a Ubisoft thing, like if so many of these projects require all hands on deck. That's just one of those things that I've learned over the years from talking to so many different Ubisoft folks, is they just kind of drift around and get pulled in and help, or just sort of parachute in briefly if needed, because just the scope of these games
is intense.
Is out of control.
Yeah. Like, and there's like multiple studios that you have to coordinate, and it gets larger, and it was getting larger and larger with the growing world size and the growing storylines, and it's pretty incredible stuff. Trying to manage that all, and so So what you intend to do is like you kind of like leapfrog between the projects, like to try to do small ones, but then have a big one.
Right.
That's what they were trying to do. So my next big one was like after I helped out Unity as well. So like that was a little stint. It was Origins, and so I went on to Assassin's Creed Origins, and that was awesome as well. That was went back into like the ancient Egyptian days and recording all the ancient Coptic language and the ancient Greek as well. That was something as well. Like it wasn't just Greek. We actually went the full yards and hard yards and like we went to like linguists and so that they can actually get it translated into the ancient Greek. That's
exactly what I mean when I talk about
nuts. Yeah,
that's the equivalent of your impulse response, where just the length's gone. Plus, that game delivered unto the gaming world my friend and wonderful talent Abu Baker Salim.
Yes,
who
awesome role. Yeah,
made his debut as Bayek, and now runs his own game studio.
That's so cool. I love those stories. It's like amazing.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and and that was utilizing like we utilized some new tech as like the like in Wise. I think it was like we tried to do. I think that was the first game to do Dolby Atmos on
oh really
at Ubisoft. Yeah, we were the guinea pigs. So yeah,
I didn't know that.
it was quite. That
funny. Makes sense because we definitely. I don't think I'm 99% sure we didn't on Syndicate. So that makes sense that the thing that's sort of right up in the hopper next to follow would be the guinea pig.
Yeah, yeah. Like on Black Flag, it was the HDR audio that Wise wanted to push forward. Like the HDR audio system, which is that's actually a really cool system when you think about it. It's basically setting priorities of sound volumes and then dynamically ducking them depending on how important that overall sound is. I know that like Battlefield, like they use that that mindset as well. Like when a loud explosion happens and then it completely nullifies every other less important sound for that happen for a duration, then it comes back. Yeah. So it's called sound focusing, in a way. So we utilize that, on Black Flag and on Origin. And I think from that point onwards, And then so from Origins, after that, went on to Valhalla. So it was like recording the with Jesper, with Sarah and Aina. That like it was the trio.
Yeah, it was, and that game just took scope to a whole other level. I mean,
that was like
I couldn't even. I played like 10% of that game, and I played for like 20 hours.
Yeah,
and it's like I just felt like I felt like my God, it's like intimidatingly just sprawling. I couldn't believe it.
Oh yeah, it was kind of nuts.
How do you even begin to compared with if you A/B that against AC1, the asset lists and stuff must be 100-fold. I mean, it must be just absolutely no comparison.
It was growing and growing and growing and like it was like it and. That's where I think like the team sizes started getting larger and larger and larger and larger. And like I think on Valhalla, I think overall there were about like across all the different studios I counted them, it was like 25 audio like people on Valhalla. Do
you have any idea what the grand total head count across all like every person who worked on the game? Do you have any sense
for the actual game? I wouldn't be surprised if it was like 1,400 people.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say because I remember Jeff saying that Syndicate's head count was something like 1,030 people or something like that.
Yeah,
and
it's insane.
And so I was gonna say if you had said over 2,000, I wouldn't have even been shocked, honestly, because it's just so bananas, and the game demands it. I mean, it's just one of those that I don't know how you make a game that size otherwise. And well, but what's crazy is so much is disproportionately landing on you. There's not a lot of other departments, if any, honestly, where so much then funnels through one person.
Port. Yeah, which is kind of nuts. Yeah. So and not only that, when that happened, like it was nuts what happened because like the COVID happened, studios were shutting down at recording studios,
Right.
not shutting down, but like they shut
sort
shop
of
for
hibernating.
So what ended up happening is because we had to record it was like over 120 actors for the game, which was mind-boggling on its own as well.
No kidding.
They had to record them, and we had to send them recording kits to their basically their basement or their closet, so I had to receive all the voice auditions of every single actor to ensure that like the tonality of the microphone was was it good enough, was it like
Right.
and I had to make notes and to say, okay, this one we can't do this one, we have to
did you have to
redo
turn
that.
down actors that you otherwise would like because they just didn't have a space that you could use?
we would resend the microphone, or we would try to we would do whatever we could to we would send kits, like the vocal booth, or try to send it to them
so that you could get some basic baffling and stuff up in there.
And basically having to create a spec for that that system. So, and everything was done in remote because we weren't even allowed in the recording studio. So so we were remoting to the remote recording. it was nuts
for that scope of work too. That's how far into the game were you when
we just got in from we were midway through beta.
I was going to say, didn't it ship
going into
2020? It shipped, right? It would have been. It would have been. You would have been at least most of the way through, at least theoretically.
We were about in terms of the audio. We're about I would say almost halfway. We were almost halfway through. And because we still had to do a whole bunch of dialogue that we'll record. There was a lot of dialogue in that game as well.
Well, especially because since every single one of the protagonist lines has to be doubled, and that's a classic RPG conundrum.
That presented a challenge in on itself as well. It's how do you actually write for how do the NPCs, which are your non-player characters, actually write? How do they talk to you, and how do they actually talk to you if you're a female or male? Because maybe in that perception back in that time period, they could have said something way different. So you had to be in that mindset. So there had to be certain guidelines into how you actually wrote the dialogue to make it so that it wasn't perceived in a certain it's male dominant or female dominant, and then so it was
such an interesting that opens up a can of worms that that just exponentially adds to scope.
So having the choice of player and female is an awesome it's an awesome feature for the player on itself, but it presents a lot of challenges for the actual recording, and the branching dialogue as well. How does that feed into itself? And so we had to write the pipeline for that as well. We extended that from Odyssey as well, because Odyssey shipped with the male and female first, and then because you could change. I think that was at any time that you could change.
You could in Syndicate as well, but there wasn't branching dialogue. I don't think
depending.
It would have just been. I think it was alternate versions of the scenes. And a lot of the missions were character specific as well. So a lot of the cinematics were baked. Probably almost all the cinematics were essentially baked one way or the other.
I remember that one quest was you were either one character or the other character, and it was not the other. You could interchange.
It was the open world gameplay that let you freely go back and forth. I think it was in Syndicate. By the time you got to Odyssey, I think it was basically two parallel games in one, which is a whole other madness. Yeah, exactly.
It's madness.
Rock
and roll.
One question. So I want to get to Yellow Brick, but I'm curious. This is probably a good segue actually. Now that I think about it, because the dialogue system was one of the things I really love of what we did together. Was
Yeah.
there a precursor to that in Valhalla? I don't remember there being when playing it. I can't remember one way or the other. Were you able to put anything along the lines of what we did?
It was very subtly introduced. It was like if you played a it was setting a basically it was setting a mood like for the actual scene. But like we kind of on Yellow Brick, we went a step further by putting it on a line by line basis. Like we actually set like certain
so
moods.
it was a mood. So okay, so there wasn't a granular aspect to it in Valhalla. That it was purely just like
set mood,
a bucket of cues that are dialogue cues, basically, and that's
pretty much.
And that's that.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Well, lucky us. So I can only reiterate, when I got involved with Yellow Brick before you did, and I remember they asked me, we need an audio director. We need someone who can be in-house. Do you have any ideas? They were looking around, and as is the case, senior level positions that are very tenured like that, they're hard to come by because those people get snatched up. And I don't remember how long the team went before you joined, but I remember getting the call from Jeff going, I have the best news about who we just hired. And it was like, holy shit. And even then, I must say, I did not, as excited as I was, mostly just because selfishly, I was excited to finally work together. I did not anticipate just how hands-on and technical and able you are at getting into the systems and finding opportunities for the music and the sound to all really dance together. So holy crap, did they get a win in having you on board? Because I think this game punches so above its weight from an audio perspective. And yeah, the number of calls that we had where you're opening up Unreal and Blueprint and we're able to, set things up very specifically, like it's unbelievable. So what made you I know we've talked about this, but just for the sake of our wonderful listeners, what made you want to make the leap? Obviously, they're an indie studio. They're not a tiny studio, but everything is tiny compared to Ubisoft. So yeah. So what made you decide I'm gonna shift gears pretty radically after what 12 years, something like that at Ubisoft?
I think it's 13 years.
13 years.
Yeah. It's a bit of a blur to be honest, but like it's a good blur, which is a good thing. What I like at some point I was like, okay, I've done many Assassin's Creed games, and I was kind of like missing that small team synergy in a way, like because it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Right. I was like, oh my goodness, this is getting wild, but in a good way. So you learn so many things from like large scale AAA size, and then one of my friends who actually is now NVIDIA, he's like, maybe you want to like I was kind of like reminiscing back in the time when I was at Pandemic and Perception. It was like the team sizes were like 30, 40 people max, and it's like right. you got to really iterate and know the people that you're working with in a way, so that's what I really missed. And I was like, okay, and then my friend at NVIDIA, he's like, why don't you give these guys a call, like Jeff at Yellow Brick. I was like, okay.
Oh, I didn't remember that. I assumed they reached out to you because of just the Ubisoft connection.
No. Wow. I was just like, oh, okay. I was just looking. I was like, okay. This seems like, and I said I was interested. I was like, okay. Hey Jeff. I was like, seems like you guys are looking for an audio director. I was like, mind giving me like a pitch, and Jeff said, no, I can't give you the pitch, but Mike will, like Mike Ledlow, he'll give the pitch. And show you the game and the franchise, like the new IP that we want to instill into the gaming world. And I was like, it was really like piquing my interest as to like what was happening, and and the use of like the thermodynamics and the simulation, and then
Oh yeah, that's the real X factor with this one for sure.
Yeah, like the fact that you can actually, like, the one thing that I love about this game is that like it's really in the power of the player that they can just do whatever they like. In like they grow their powers, they grow they grow with their progression in terms of like their outfits and their weapons. We did that like on the sound level, and also on the music level. Like we also did that in the base camp as well. Like as you upgrade your base camp musically, like it starts growing.
The fact that
Spoiler alert,
the musical subsystem of just the base camp
yeah,
is like, it's not the most complicated aspect of the game, but it's funny for a thing that's kind of creature comfort, just baseline quality of life for the player.
yeah.
I was looking back at it because I was writing up the a text commentary whenever I have a new game. I'll put like a text description of things that we worked on together and stuff in the game for my YouTube channel. And I was working on it this past weekend, and I went back and looked through my documents to remember, all the variations, night and day cycle, and sort of, the stemming to mitigate the repetitiousness of it and the way that it evolves musically. And I was like, man, even just the base camp is a pretty deep well for a thing that's not like the main selling point of the game. Like it's a hub. It's the place, that is, yes, you're there a lot, but it's not the focus of the gameplay, and yet it got a lot of attention.
one thing I really want to point out on that, like, because it is the base camp, but it was just like to want to just instill this feeling of home. Like,
right.
you're coming back from the expedition.
Wilds.
You come back, you inadvertently you do spend a lot of time there. So, and you progress in like with your companions, and you want to have that sense of that camaraderie in that place. So it made sense to like make the music organically grow over time, and you share that with the player. So it's really cool on what we did with the system.
Oh yeah,
I'm quite proud of that. Everyone at work, they're like, "Oh my god, this is amazing."
I've gotten so many messages from the team, like little DMs over the last 6-8 months, where people discover, I was just playing the game this past weekend, and I realized after 2 hours the base camp music had evolved quite a lot, and how cool is that? And so I feel like I've repeated the conversation over and over. Where, credit to Aldo to figuring out the nice balance, because a system like that also then immediately runs into this challenge of, well, how do we then make the scope not then completely run away with itself? Because we could have easily had an hour of material just
you can get down that rabbit hole.
Oh, it's so easy to fall into that trap because there's never enough. It's like it's at some point you just go, the only sort of like the idealized version is one where it's just perpetually alive and nothing ever repeats ever, and you just get down to this realm of procedurally generated music at that point, where it's just a simulation of the world. It's not even canned at that point. And so, short of that, where do you draw the line? And so to that end, the dialogue system is another one that you deserve such huge credit for, because this was one of those things that, as a longtime gamer like you, this was my big passion growing up as well, big nerdy gamer. And I've always loved elaborate branching dialogue, like whether it's the classic point and click adventures, like LucasArts and Sierra games of the 90s, which LucasArts really had their rudimentary version of that. And then, of course, I'm a big
Monkey
BioWare.
Island.
Yeah. A big BioWare nerd. I love me some Mass Effect, Dragon Age, and those kinds of games that have these elaborate systems. And I was always dissatisfied because I thought, as a gamer, the writers are bending over backwards to give so much agency to the player.
Yeah.
To have the conversation go a bunch of different places. In one moment to the next, you might be dealing with something really heavy and really personal, and then it might get a little bit lighter, or even overtly kind of they're like messing with each other and it's jokey, and the music is like at best a kind of crude lowest common denominator through it. And I always dreamt of, like, obviously I worked on a musical where the branching dialogue system are done through song, and so it becomes the whole thing, but that's the whole gameplay.
Yeah.
For a game like this, where it's technically, it's like the base camp. It's not the main feature in theory. It's a major feature, but in a game where this physics-driven magic combat is clearly the thing that so much emphasis is going to be placed on, it's easy to overlook making a robust system. So I love the day, because this is one of those ideas that 100% started with you. I didn't know what the plan was going to be here.
I had a feeling about, like, as I was, and this actually came like organically, because like we weren't really looking at this until actually playing the game. I'm like, this really needs something to drive these like scenes, because they are important for the progression of the story. It's like, okay, we really need to and I there's such a thing as like there's 2 points of you can like hit the hammer on the head, like, to the player and say, this is what we're going to do and this is how you should feel. Or the other approach is to like maybe like have it like underscore and gradually like keep them invested and give the feeling for the player and underscore that emotion. And I think we draw that line as well, and it works in tandem with the base camp music. It works seamlessly because it blends in and out of certain plot points, and sometimes
it's subtle. It's just the right amount of subtle, I would say.
Yeah, like, and some conversations don't have it, and so the underlying base camp music can play throughout, or it's silence as well. Like, it's also good to have breaks and lulls so that it comes in. And then when there is a plot point that comes in that's important for the conversation, like, we hammer home that Bryn has to do X, and investigate this thing and do something, and then there's like a revelation, or like there's a crescendo, there's a reveal moment that happens inside the music that it strikes that point as well. And it's cool because the player actually pressed that button to actually get to that next step, right?
That's what makes it, to me at least, that's why it works. What makes it effective is that these branching dialogue systems are predicated on the player deciding what to say.
Yeah.
So if you close your eyes and just listen to it, like if you listen to someone playing a game like that, it would rarely flow like 100% natural conversation, because there's those gaps for the players deciding what they want to say. And so it can become tricky to figure out how to score it other than just putting a mood piece underneath the whole time. And I think that the kind of size of our building blocks and the speed with which they kind of, they're like a boat that makes wide arc turns,
I really love how you scored these moments. Like, it really, like, kudos to you. Like,
it was team effort,
how it's
man.
actually sculpted together. That was quite nice. Yeah.
I mean, it was one of those where I can be pretty opinionated on the musical design, the implementation specs, because that's like my main focus. And this is one of the only times where one of the only projects I've ever worked on, I mean, where every time you would kind of present, here's what I think could work great. At most of the time, it was like like stand-up comics going, yes, and I would go, what if we did this on top of that? Never once did I go, boy, I don't know, man. That feels, I don't know about that, because you just, I mean, not to turn this podcast into a big love fest, but you're just full of great ideas. And they were always so well connected to the game mechanics. Like, another one that is worth highlighting that I think is so cool is that this is such an action game in so many respects, like combat and the sort of free combinability of your magic is so central to it. But what's interesting is that outside the boss fights, there's not discrete combat music, which to me is a fairly bold choice.
Yeah.
But it was, again, credit to you for, I had assumed that we would discover it just was absolutely necessary at some point or another. But from playing the game, obviously these encounters are pretty short. And so the idea of just coloring,
injecting, like,
it's like a little texture, but even that we've made kind of multi-layered and granular so it can come and go in a staged way, and it doesn't just feel like a switch flipping on and off.
I think that's the good call that we made, like, as we were playing the game, because like you do come into these like little battles quite often, and like if we were to like switch that knob all the time, like, oh, you're in combat, oh, you're off combat, oh, you're like that,
it'd be super whiplashy.
Yeah, and especially like for the many hours that you would actually experience that. Then, but then like what we then do is, as soon as you actually do encounter the massive epic encounters, then it's like, oh, like that's when we like, you know, inject, okay, you are now in like this epic encounter. Now like there's almost a storyline that occurs inside the epic as well. That we did a full design on that. It was we kind of went
again very
to town on that.
Very spoiling because I really loved how, you know, we'd play it again and again and again, and we're literally going in Wise, like on a screen share in a Zoom call, like negotiating on how many meters away, like down to the specific meter, we want to draw the line on, you know, does this still feel like we're actively engaged in combat, or are we kind of taking our distance and getting like kind of trying to recollect ourselves, and so the system can adjust accordingly. And again, you really spoiled me with how much, because I always want to go into these as much as possible. And, you know, sometimes I have to do it myself, and sometimes I'm just limited by the bandwidths of the team's ability to support it, because, you know, a lot of it requires engineering support to come in and be able to just expose certain things to Wise, and I just couldn't. I never felt like you ever were anything other than excited to try it, and then would add 50 other things on top of it that made it better than anything I could have ever possibly imagined. So yeah, it was so. I really feel like it's a very reactive score. There's a lot going on in these systems, but it's subtle. There's an elegance to it, and that's just all lands on your shoulders as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I think that what's cool is that it came out organically through like playing the game as much as possible, like just and then and one
sort of
one
bottom
thing
up approach.
Yeah, and one thing that was like was at the start of the project. It was like I didn't want it to say. I wanted to kind of like challenge you in a way, like to say I don't want it to sound like X music or that music. It's like I want to actually say, like here are some like key audio pillars or some keywords that would actually remember what we were talking about, like the actual orchestral elements. It's like it's not meant to be like a traditional orchestra. It could actually be like broken up, or could actually be what would we say, deconstructed. Like and we even went to the nth degree in like recording that at Nashville, like how you actually did like the recording techniques is like completely different, you know?
No, absolutely. A lot of credit to you. You know, because I had already been on the project for quite a while before you joined, and we had gone through multiple waves of experimenting with aesthetics from something kind of like really novel, like very almost like anti-fantasy. We're sort of going, what would be the opposite? Not opposite, but what's something that's just really unexpected? And then I remember at Mike's encouragement, it was like, well, you know, people associate fantasy with these big classic kind of Lord of the Rings traditional orchestral aesthetics, and so then sort of swung the pendulum all the way that direction just to kind of see what it would be like.
What it went through,
and that was also clearly not right. Everyone agreed. They certainly felt like, okay, it's just not inspiring. You know, it feels like, okay, we've played that before.
We've been there before.
And I remember that was right around the time that you joined. And again, you know, I'm all about experimentation, but still, even despite that, you really pushed me. And I think the score is way more unique as a direct result of your your pushing and
thanks.
your encouragement and yeah, no, I always explain to folks, these things are not made in a vacuum. And as much as it is true that I wrote every note of music, it was not one note of it was made outside of the context of our constant, frequently, almost daily conversations about it. And you would send me these elaborate, like at 21 seconds in this thing, I really like whatever that sound is. That could be a whole vocabulary as part of the score. And I would go, oh, well, that was this weird instrument. Yeah, you're right. I can make that way more of a featured color than I was originally planning. And really wonderful, healthy collaboration, I feel like.
And I think ultimately, like what I always like try to go for, like the goal is like as you close your eyes and you just like you listen to the soundtrack and you're like, yep, this is definitely Eternal Strands. You know, like players will listen and they'll be like, yep, it came from this place, because it like now like captures a certain feeling and a vibe that is now unique for this installment, right?
I certainly hope so. And to the extent that it is, you deserve an enormous pile of credit for helping to achieve that. I'm curious, as you well, it's just true, man. It's been such a pleasure. And I'm curious, given all these prior Ubisoft games, and like you said, the goal was to kind of feel a little bit more intimately connected to the team and much more a part of it. But that also means that you didn't have a big audio department to, shepherd all this through. A huge amount of the heavy lifting fell solely to you. I mean, I think you had obviously there was some help.
We had two audio designers like Thiago Schaefer and Alex Davies, and audio/tool programmer Gwen helped us out on the tool front, and basically just had to be smart about what you like. No way could we create tools. No way could we create the reinvent the wheel. So basically, it's like just being smart and like what you want. Taking on that knowledge of what I did on AAA games, it's like, okay, we approached it this way on this feature. Now, how do we approach it at a small scale and execute that in a way, like for example,
it's just
like
funny because it's like. Well, sorry, continue.
I was just gonna say, like just from like the pipeline standpoint, it's like we're like creating the music state system inside Unreal. I just was like investigating. I was like, okay, there is a plugin that has like it's like Logic Driver that actually is like a visual state driver that it can actually interface with Wise, and it's like the link between the game and what Wise does, and it links all the systems together, whether you're like if you're in the base camp or if you're in a quest or if you're in an encounter, epic fight, and then like tells Wise, oh, this is where I'm at, and then Wise then dictates the transitions where you actually need to go. And so when you like, we didn't create that. We just like I just saw that. I was like, oh, put two and two together. Let's put that in. Okay, it works. Now let's
perfect
make
example
a game.
of what I mean, though. Where it's you are doing what previously required like 30 people collaborating, and just you and a scrappy team shipping a game that in the days of AC1, everything about this game would have been considered AAA. A 25, 30 hour branching narrative, huge boss fights and all that. It's just the inflationary. It's like almost more fair to call wild. Eternal Strands AAA, and Valhalla is like quadruple A, because they've all just
quadruple A. Oh my god!
They've all just. Because it's just you could fit like 30 AC1s inside of Valhalla. It's just so crazy and
which is insane.
This is not like I've worked on the gamut, and including some truly small, very intimate, very focused games. And this is a sprawling game. It's just not 300 hours.
Yeah.
So yeah, for a team to be able to lift it, and that applies to every department. I mean, just the sheer number of animations and level and world design, and it's just crazy. Everybody really had to do a lot.
The one thing that I loved about this company is that everybody knew what they had to do. Like they weren't afraid to push that envelope in their field of expertise, like the thermodynamics. Like we're in a team of now it's like 50 odd people, but
Right.
that is like to push that envelope on a new engine using like this is crazy stuff, but we did it.
I think one of the coolest,
and the ability to climb on anything, even the epic creatures that's moving along as well. And they're flying as well.
yeah,
What? That's
I know
crazy.
it's totally nuts. And I think one of the best things I can say about Yellow Brick, I don't think there's any reason I don't think there's any reason why I wouldn't be allowed to mention this. But the team, this Brick Week concept.
Oh yeah, that was cool. Yeah,
where
yeah.
Well, why don't you explain it as an actual employee? I just was watching from afar as an outsider, but I thought that was so cool, and it spoke so well to the genuine love the team has to what they're making. So explain what the Brick Week concept was.
So the concept is like it's kind of like you have a because at Google they have like this Google Day where like people can just do like spend a day to do whatever they like off the tasks that they're being given to.
Right.
So we said, okay, instead of
Google.
it's a Google Day, it's let's make it a Brick Week, and so let's spend a week and just like out of the game, inside the game, if you want to do something that you haven't planned and that contributes in some way or form to the betterment of making the game better. And so like we each milestone we actually had that that Brick Week, and that proved like immeasurably awesome because we created some the weather system. There's a level modifier system, which is the weathers that turned out to be that. There's so many things that like the ice bridges, it was so many things,
so much polish.
Yeah,
like I remember I would show up to these sprint review or like milestone review calls, or like after a Brick Week, people would say, "Here's what I chose to work on," and it was so infectious how people like. It's a task that they might never have been asked to do, or no one would even thought to ask them to do, and then the game just now has this feature that's so cool and going to be a defining thing. Like the weather is a great one. I was trying to remember a specific example, but I always found it very inspiring that everybody and everyone was excited. They loved the game. They loved the team. They looked forward to showing up to those meetings to say, here's what I did. When I was just free to add whatever to the game. And
the great
idea from the management.
Yeah. The really cool thing is that like so many like systems that would not have been actually scoped or planned actually ended up being integrated into the systems into the game as a consequence to that. So yeah, awesome.
Yeah, it's so for me, who I work with is always by far the most relevant concern when joining a new project or whatever. It's like, I don't care if it's a game that, if it's like just a pay the bills mobile title that's some like as a co-dev with some studio or whatever, like whatever the case, I don't care when it's people I like working with, like there are certain people that you're just so lucky to work with that anytime they call, the answer is yes. I don't care what the bigger context is. And it's a double pleasure when it turns out to be a game like this, where, it's a cool game. It's a great project and just the best people. And so, yeah, man, I don't want to abuse your morning any further. You've given me almost 2 hours of your time, but
holy moly, that went quick.
Yeah, well, you've had a pretty incredible career, and you're somebody that because of the few years that I've been doing this show, I had you in my mental list And then as soon as you joined Yellow Brick, I filed it as like, all right, this would be a good one to keep in the pocket for when the game ships, because it would be cool. And yeah, as of when we're recording this
tomorrow.
I think when this publishes, the game will have been out for a week or something like that, or we'll see. Whatever the time frame is. Yes. So hopefully we are celebrating a glorious launch by the time this comes out. Either way, man, it has been a pleasure both today and the last several years working on this game together. And cheers to many more.
Yeah, likewise, man. It's great to be on there. It was a bit of pleasure, by the way. Yeah, awesome.